Hey guys, it's Rachel, and this is the second time I've made this video because I made one last night and unfortunately there was no sound attached to it. So I'm making it this morning, and usually I know I make my videos on a Thursday and today is a Monday. So it was just a case of trying to get it up today for you. Come Lou, come! And come! This week well, not this week now, but last week the girls were looking at the topic of eating disorders and bipolar disorder, and I know that Tracy will have made a video and she actually has bipolar. I know Ariel made a video and she explored the issue of bipolar. Because I've had no internet, I actually haven't been able to actually watch those videos, so I hope that what I discuss in this video isn't too repetitive, and I guess I'm going to try and just explore the issue personally and what I can maybe offer as advice to people who are dealing with an eating disorder as well as bipolar disorder. Okay, I'm very much an advocate for the idea that it's very difficult to diagnose other mental health problems if a person is still actively engaging in their eating disorder. I'm very much of the belief, which I'm sure many of you know from other videos that I've made, that I think it's very difficult to diagnose another disorder if a person is actively eating disordered. That isn't to say that a person cannot have other mental health problems alongside their eating disorder. It's more about the impact that an eating disorder has on the person as a whole with regards to physical and obviously psychological issues, but known and it can either be taken very seriously or not taken very seriously, that the effects of malnutrition, not eating enough, or even, you know, eating and purging and whatever aspect of an eating disorder you have, that you're not giving your body what it needs to be able to cope emotionally, and people quite often suffer with insomnia, which just makes things far worse. They have a low energy, they isolate themselves because of issues surrounding food and being around food and being with other people. It becomes very difficult to have friendships, have relationships, because of the impact of the eating disorder. And so I feel personally that a person can only be completely correctly diagnosed if some of those issues have been dealt with, and that a person is more stable within their eating disorder, or in recovery from their eating disorder, should I say. So having other mental health problems, that doesn't mean that those mental health problems didn't come first and the eating disorder followed, or that the eating disorder came first and then that was led to depression, etc. So I guess that's kind of my point really, that it's very difficult to know which one came first, and it's very difficult to know whether the eating disorder is affecting you. With regards to bipolar, I wanted to discuss mood, so not so much the diagnosis itself, but the mood swings that people can suffer. And I'm sure many people do feel that they are on that spectrum when eating disorders, because you are all over the place. Your mood levels, your anxiety levels, your inability to sleep or sleep too much, or whatever it is that is going on for you, can lead to low moods, can lead to periods of being more manic, lack of sleep, lack of nutrition, and all of those things can impact a mood in such a way that you are swinging from high to low. And usually for people, if their eating is more consistent and their weight is stabilized, some of those mood difficulties, some of those high levels of agitation, and with sleep and nutrition, a person can stabilise. Now there's many people who have recovered from an eating disorder, such as myself, and I know there's many others who are out there and still deal with other mental health problems. In the case of bipolar, I think that a number of people who can be diagnosed with that, especially when they've had an eating disorder. It can help them make sense of what went on for them. So maybe in some people's cases it is that their eating disorder was a means of coping with some of those highs and lows. It was a means of getting through those shifts in mood, of getting through a real low or getting through a real high, and the eating disorder then kind of takes a life of its own on. And as I just discussed before, it can be a result of the eating disorder that a person's moods are high and low. And so with any of us really, it's very difficult to know which comes first. My view on the issue of bipolar is that it very much is a diagnosis. When a person is diagnosed with it, it can make an awful lot of sense to them. It can help clinicians, psychiatrists and such know how to treat the person, know how to medicate the person. It has been suggested over the past year to myself that I am suffering with bipolar or some sort of mood disorder connected to that, and it does make sense to me because I have been in recovery from my eating disorder for a long time, and yet I've still had periods over the years where I've been very detached and manic, and that has then resulted in a crash, which has then resulted on me being in hospital, and then my medication gets sorted and I stabilise again. And for me, the diagnosis is helpful in the sense that it makes a lot of things make sense for me. It actually takes an element of the self-blame. So if I reflect on, I've been stable well over a year now, last summer perhaps, I can maybe think, well actually I wasn't doing anything wrong and I was doing everything I could to stay well, and sometimes the shit hits the fan. And whilst I can reflect on what potentially led to some of those things, I take, not that I take away some of the responsibility, but it makes sense that it was something I wasn't in complete control of, and that's helped me explore some of that as well though. So rather than beating myself up about doing everything wrong, I can maybe reflect on that and think, well, I actually couldn't completely control what was going on. What I can do now is look at what potentially could have triggered me to go into a very variant mood state, being particularly high and then kind of crashing, and having my medication shifted around and the impact that then had on me. And during that time it was essential that I continued to eat, that I continued to give nutrients to my body so that I didn't make any of that worse. It was essential that I slept enough, that I had enough interaction, that wasn't overstimulus, that wasn't me isolating myself. And so in reflection of that, I can maybe think about the situations that caused high levels of stress. Now this year I've had high levels of stress, especially through this kind of past few months. University has been incredibly difficult, it's been incredibly stressful. I'm looking for a job, I'm filling out my clinical forms, and yet I've got through it. So whilst last year my high levels of stress I wasn't able to manage, I have done this year, and I think that that's where the suggestion of bipolar for me has helped me, because I think to myself, well, last year I wasn't aware that potentially could have been the issue. I could only understand it through a series of events affecting me. And what I've had to come to terms with over this past year is the fact that I can't do everything, and I find that very hard. And I look to other people and I think, well, why can't I do all of that? Why can't I work those hours? Why can't I just constantly be busy? Why can't I do everything I want to be able to do? And if I do, I could potentially put myself at risk of having another breakdown or of having a manic episode and going into a highly agitated state, which is quite often the case if I do too much. And so what I've had to learn to do is to monitor those stress levels. So that isn't to say that I've not been able to work and be busy and be stressed. It just means that along that process that I'm mindful of the times I need to have out, that when I feel too much, that I can say, do you know what, I need to have this weekend off, or when I get home from work I need to be able to just have a few hours to myself. And so it's making sure those things are in place, and that's what's helped me the most, so that I'm constantly aware of where I'm at within myself. And I think that for me is going to be the answer with regards to this. So whether I'm bipolar or not becomes a bit of a non-issue, because essentially what matters the most is that I don't go back into a place where I'm not coping again. And it's all been a learning curve, and so I've had to forgive myself almost for not being able to do everything, but also appreciate that what I do is enough, and that I do work hard, and that I put a huge amount of effort into the things that I do. My self-help group means the world to me. It's something that I'm passionate about, and I can put so much energy into. Some of my photography has come back around, which is like really amazing as well. And it is just about balance, and I think that isn't just for people with mental health problems or bipolar disorder or what have you. That's like as a general, as a whole really. You know, people go on holiday, people have their summer holiday, which is their time out to just get away from work, get away from stresses, and just rejuvenate really, and just have some sort of rest. And that's all that I try to do, and it's not like I'm doing anything special or amazing or that requires huge amounts of strength. It's about realising that I do have limits, and that I can only do so much, and that if I can't do as much one week as the week before, that it isn't a bad thing, that it isn't that I'm not strong enough. It actually means that I am strong enough, because I'm recognising that, and I'm realising that there is only so much that any one person can do. And people take time out of work, people leave work early perhaps, people take a few days off so they can have a weekend away, and that's part of what I'm trying to do really. And so that's what I've had to learn this past year, is just what my triggers are really, and the things that can impact my mood. Now I can't guarantee that everything's always going to be amazing, but right now, because of how much I've learned this year, which I feel I've learned a huge amount, and that's because I'm no longer in therapy, and I haven't been, and so I've had to learn my own way, and I think I've done a pretty good job of it, to be fair. And the other thing is potentially what people with bipolar can do, is that in a state of kind of mania, or even if it's not hugely advanced mania, but kind of when your head's racing more and you're kind of thinking, is to do those things, but actually not take on so much, and to actually take a step back from yourself and say, or listen to another person, or say to another person, can you kind of call me on whether you think I'm doing too much, so that somebody will say to me, do you know what, you need to take a break, you've like worked like for the past I don't know how many days, you need a day off, you need some time out. And that's what we all need really. So that's a way of not preventing, but of managing those times. And if your mood starts to drop and you're losing your motivation, to actually not surrender to that and to give in to that, but to actually fight that and try and find the things that can lift you out of that. So I hope that that's been of some help. What I guess I need to mention is medication. There are a lot of medications out there which are incredibly helpful for people with bipolar. I'm on Seroquel and I'm on lamotrigine, and that seems to really help stabilise things for me. I'm also on duloxetine. I use diazepam when my anxiety levels are high, and sleeping tablets to make sure that I do sleep. It's a lot of medication that I'm on, but it works, and I think that that's the most important thing. And I know it can be a very difficult thing for people to be on medication, but I certainly don't believe that it lessens the fact that I'm in recovery, or that I'm recovered, because at the end of the day, that's what I need to be well. Then that's all that matters. And many people take many medications for many reasons, not mental health problems but physical problems, and at the end of the day, as hard as it can be to be on medication, it also might be essential for what keeps you well. And for me, if being well means being on a medication, then I don't have a problem. problem with that. Okay guys, I'm going to try and get this uploaded, and I will see you